one thing I do want to stress is that while omnichannel is important, you will not get much success if you just look at a touch point plan and say, I want to do omnichannel across these touch points, which I want to buy, right? You have to be able to answer why you need those touch points. What are each of the touch points going to do for you? And in many budget constrained scenario, what are your prioritizations, right? Because you can do an omni-channel with 3 to 4 touch points, or you can do omni-channel with maybe 15, 20 touch points. It really depends on how large your campaign is, what kind of budgets you have in place, and how I think dramatically you are trying to change consumer behavior.
Welcome, Ryan. So I know Ryan for the last, 12 years almost? Yeah. So we know each other from Nokia days, and welcome to Podcast with Lijo. And we met as part of the marketing team of Nokia of India, Middle East and Africa. And I know you went on to do much more stuff in India. You worked on e-commerce. You came back to Dubai, started working with Aster. So just take us through, and so that the audience comes to know more about you.
Sure. Thanks, Lijo. Delighted to be here. I mean, I'm looking forward to doing a podcast with you. Podcast with Lijo is a quite an interesting niche space that you're into. So yeah, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I have a fairly long marketing experience. Started off with Nestle, so basically in the brand space in India. Did a lot of work in terms of building out brands, developing new products. A lot of stuff centered around consumer behavior and consumer insights. Also did work in trade marketing, so the full spectrum of FMCG marketing. Then got an opportunity to move to London with Nokia. This is when Nokia was this big behemoth in the mobile phone space, quite a while back actually. Worked in Johannesburg, leading marketing for Sub-Saharan Africa. Then got a chance to come to Dubai in 2012. And I think our association has been more or less from that time onwards, right? So like you mentioned, did some work with Nokia in planning, analytics, go-to-market. Got an opportunity to lead the erstwhile HMD or Nokia mobile phones e-commerce for a while. Then moved to India, worked with the Aditya Birla Group, handled marketing as well as e-commerce for Pantaloons. Built out the whole D2C space, the omni-channel sales place, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. Came back to Dubai in 2021, working with Aster, which is one of the largest integrated, definitely the largest private healthcare player in the UAE. So it's been an interesting journey. Lots of different geographies, lots of different business models, lots of different types of marketing. So very excited to talk about that today with you.
So great. So I guess in terms of geography, pretty much Europe, India, Middle East, Africa. Is there any geography that I'm missing?
Yeah, that's about it. But as part of my global role, also did some work in
London,
LATAM, Southeast Asia, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. So from core food products to devices to clothes to hospitals and clinics and stuff like that. So, and one of the key reasons I wanted Ryan on the show is that the fact that you have a kind of a big spectrum, right? Of having worked brand, you worked retail, you worked trade, you worked Pantaloons, which has got online and offline. And I guess when online was during the COVID times, when it was just going through the roof. So big question in my head, okay, and I'm sure the listeners' head, right? What is omnichannel? Is there something called omnichannel sales? Is there something called omnichannel marketing? How is it different from multi-channel? And it's so much conversation around that. If you can clear something around that.
Surely, sure. These terms are thrown around a lot, right? I think it's good to get a sense of what they actually mean. So let's talk omni-channel marketing first.
Right.
Omni-channel marketing basically means telling a coherent story to the consumer across different touch points. It's basically as simple as that, right? The way you look at it is that the consumer journey, when the consumer is making a decision about a brand, making a decision about a need and a subsequent purchase, he or she is influenced by a number of different touch points. Some of these are, where the person is conscious of being influenced and is searching for this information. there's also subliminal messaging that's coming through in the background. Now, making sure that your marketing covers all these different touch points and presents a coherent point of view to the customer is essentially what you would call
Right.
omni-channel marketing. Uh, Omnichannel sales is something that's related but slightly different.
Okay.
In the modern world where there are multiple touch points, and let me give you an example of that, right? And I'll take Pantaloons as a good example. Pantaloons is very well known for being a store of fast fashion, affordable fashion brand that spans the breadth of India. Predominantly known for the products that it sells in its own stores. Many of these are also branded pantaloons, right? While they sell a number of multi-branded apparel as well. You then have pantaloons.com.
Right.
You have the Pantaloons app. You also have basically Pantaloons available on places like Myntra and Flipkart.
Right.
You have so that's just where the consumer kind of reaches out and tries to buy Pantaloons products. From a delivery perspective, if you go to a store, you buy the product from that store. If that product is not available in the store, it can come from a neighboring store. When you buy it from the online channel, you predominantly expect it to come from a warehouse near you. But one of the possibilities, of course, nowadays is that it comes from a store next to you, right?
Right.
Now, making sure that these offers are coherent, that these offers are linked to each other, that the spectrum of products that is available or the portfolio of products that's available in the different channels is relevant to the consumer is part of omni-channel sales. I think we won't get into omni-channel sales right now,
Absolutely, yeah.
but I think that's the important difference between omni-channel marketing, which is largely about communication and messages, and omni-channel sales, which is about product discovery and product delivery to the consumer. They need to be hand in hand, but they are fundamentally two different parts of the consumer journey.
Coming back to omnichannel marketing, right? Now, fortunately, you are a generation, we are a generation where it became omnichannel. It's not like we were born into a digital world. There was this transition. If you go back from like standalone stores, modern trade to online, and there was this entire transition. One of the biggest challenges, I think, is the mind shift change that has to happen in an organization, right? So how does an organization move its entire strategy? And like if you look at an organization like Pantaloon or Aster, like to move from a comfort zone of doing marketing, which is only at specific channels, how does an organization move into a very structured approach to omnichannel marketing?
So, Dijo, if you look at businesses that own their own channel, so examples of these would be something like a Pantaloons or something like an Aster Hospitals, Aster Clinics, right? Where you own the final touch point with the consumer and you also own the product. There is obviously a huge amount of applicability to omnichannel. But having said that, even players like an Apple or Nestle can embrace omnichannel.
Right.
And this is while we're using the term is quite new and reasonably new rather. But even back in the day, 20 years ago, when I started marketing, you still had multiple touch points that you had that you could use to tell a story. You had obviously ATL marketing.
Right.
Now, ATL has a number of different components. You would have the still images you see on print and on outdoor. You see moving images that you see on video. You also have radio. The kind of conversation you have across these needs to be blended and integrated, right? It isn't as simple as shooting a TV and basically putting the audio part of that on radio. There needs to be a coherent message that uses that medium to its full potential. Then you had BTL, right? You had visibility that was outside stores, there was visibility inside stores.
Right.
In an FMCG context, the owning the aisle that the consumer is shopping at is really important. So if you own the chocolate aisle, that becomes really important. It gives you a lot of credibility in that space. You could also use things like couponing via your retailers, bills, etc., or the magazines in store in terms of modern trade to provide some promotional content, all of which integrates in your overall message. So omnichannel, while it's something that's probably most relevant to a D2C player, whether it's offline or online, is also relevant to other brands that operate purely in FMCG or personal devices space.
Yeah. So again, so omnichannel you kind of have your legs on both boats kind of sailing, right?
It's
to an-
more like multiple boats, right?
multiple
So this is
boats.
not a two-legged race, right?
Right.
This is about staying afloat in all the relevant touch points. And I think it's basically about the consumer journey. So what is important to the consumer when it comes to making a decision? And sorry, I'll go back to our mobile phone days. We know that when a consumer decides, when does a consumer start looking to buy a phone? When your current phone,
Yeah.
right, is giving you trouble.
Correct.
It could be that the phone is slowing down. It could be that the phone has been damaged. It could be that your screen is cracked. But whenever you have a problem with your current phone, your antennae kind of perk up.
Absolutely.
And you start looking at, okay, what are the latest models that are in place? What are the offers in place, right? That's when you actively start looking at the market. However, a lot of the research shows that people use around probably 17 to 18 different touch points to kind of make a decision about a phone purchase. Some of this could be which brands are at the forefront in terms of in your space, right? So are they doing stuff that's relevant to you? If photography is important for me, is the brand in the photography space? If music is important to me, is the brand in the music space? Equally, what are people saying about it, right? The people that I follow on Instagram, are they talking about these products? And these are probably more relevant when it comes to something that has a certain high degree of involvement. Right. So high involvement products would be something that you talk about. You don't typically talk about your, the soap that you use to wash your face with, right? So high involvement products are things that influencers, creators on Instagram, on TikTok can talk about. When it comes to other products like doctors, right? This is something that you're always, again, you know that people are looking for certain types of doctors. You may not need to know who the best, orthopedic surgeon is till you have a knee problem. Right. But your antennae are up when people are talking about these. You want to know who has a reputation of being a good doctor, which facilities are good to go to, what healthcare providers have expertise in different areas. Right. So there's this constant consumer journey that's taking place. It is quite dangerous to get fixated on the bottom of the funnel, right? Absolutely. Where people are very close to making that decision. You concentrate all your eggs in that basket. So Omnichannel also asks you to kind of be cognizant of the entire consumer journey and make sure that the different touch points that are relevant to the different elements of the consumer journey are taken, are paid attention to.
Yeah, very valid point. Like, for example, going back to the example you spoke about, which is the mobile, right? Now, in the entire consumer journey, which is an omni-channel journey for the mobile, right? A lot of the research, whereas testimonials would come online, right? That will not be in the offline space. Offline space would be more touch and feel, get a real feel, and accordingly, the decision tree that goes into deciding that should I buy this phone, it changes when it's online and when it's offline. And do organizations have to work at a communication strategy, each of those touch points, and have a differentiated strategy, because based on why are they doing that, why are they reaching that touch point where is for a very specific need. For example, for the mobile, I want to touch and feel, screen size, and stuff like that. So should there be a differentiated strategy for each of the touch points? I know this has to be thread that goes through everything, but is there a different need that is kind of fulfilled at different touch points, and should organizations work towards fulfilling that information need or reinforcement need from a product buying perspective?
Absolutely, Lijo. See, it depends what your proposition is to get the person to buy at that point in time. So let me give you a hypothetical example, right? Let's suppose we discover that people love using macro photography when it comes to mobile phones. Right? Now, if you decide that I'm going to invest and build that kind of capability into my next gen product, then you must be prepared to tell that story across the omni-channel touch points that exist. So, for example, this could take the form of you looking at outdoor, where tiny images, just for everyone's benefit. Macro is basically when you focus on objects that are very close to your camera, right, but you're able to blow that up, right? I assume everyone knows this, but I just want to make sure. So you would have to invest in certain lenses with certain apertures and sensors that take advantage of that capability. Now, your outdoor needs to talk about that, right? You need to basically be able to demonstrate phenomenal images on the outdoor. You also need to work with influencers to talk about their experiences in basically building this out. You might want to get photography experts on the table to build almost tutorials in the digital space to show you how to best take advantage of these capabilities. Very importantly, in store, you need to have certain setups in place to allow people to see how the macro capability of your product comes to life. Going back to our shared history, Lijo, if you remember, we did something like this with the first, I think, the 51 megapixel camera that we had.
41.
The 41 megapixel camera, sorry. And we basically showcased its low life capability.
Yeah.
We showcased its macro capability as well at that point in time, right? So these were retail activations that took place in malls, that took place in large stores. And then we also had an adaptation of that to certain, I guess, retail benches. I think you were running some of those, right?
I was running on some of the retail activations that was happening.
Yes, right. So I guess these are good examples of how you take something that is brought to life on a large format medium like outdoor, that also can be built into the digital space and can be built into retail. And I'm sure when you talk about it on radio, the idea is what are the kind of images you'd want to chase? What about macro turns you on, right? Is it about flower photography? Is it insect photography? Is it jewelry, right? Is it parts of the human anatomy? So you can have these conversations, but the kind of messages and the communication hooks that you have on the different media touch points will need to differ, although it all kind of boils back to what are you trying to sell? What are you getting people to buy, right? All needs to link together.
Yeah. So maybe we'll take a step back from the mobile industry. I think we are going back to old love, and I always say that old love Nokia never goes away. Now, see, the thing is, fortunately, you have worked kind of an omni-channel in India, in the Middle East, right? So, does it differ in terms of India is a large country, pantaloon across so many cities, geographically it makes a difference, the consumer behavior makes a difference. Is omni-channel strategy, if somebody moves from here to India or India to London, does it remain the same, or do you need a deep consumer insights in the buying behavior for every country, and it keeps changing? Is there omni-channel strategy for every country different?
See, I think it would be different. These don't operate into totally separate worlds, right? However, you do need to understand how consumers make their buying decision. I think that is the fundamental of any omni-channel strategy. People who have worked in a particular industry for a while probably know this. They may not even need to do consumer research to do this. However, if you are getting into a new industry, I strongly recommend that you get this inciting work done to understand how people make their decisions. Once you understand how they make their decisions, you need to figure out what can you do to influence that decision in your favor. So is it about creating a new product or augmenting your service in a certain way? Is it a certain proposition that comes to life? And you need to have that, let's call it a mini strategy in place, or an understanding of consumer behavior in place before you go to implement omnichannel. One thing I do want to stress is that while omnichannel is important, you will not get much success if you just look at a touch point plan and say, I want to do omnichannel across these touch points, which I want to buy, right? You have to be able to answer why you need those touch points. What are each of the touch points going to do for you? And in many budget constrained scenario, what are your prioritizations, right? Because you can do an omni-channel with 3 to 4 touch points, or you can do omni-channel with, maybe 15, 20 touch points. It really depends on how large your campaign is, what kind of budgets you have in place, and how, I think, dramatically you are trying to change consumer behavior.
Right. It's very interesting touch point you spoke about in terms of budgeting, right? And that remains like, and I think the budgeting starts right from the research phase, right? Of trying to understand, because so much has changed. Like e-commerce, the online part of the Omni was so big 2020 to 2022 that it's not so big now. Physical is back. So the consumer behaviors are changing so much. Millennial, Gen X, the way they consume content, the way they're creating content. So everything is changing so drastically and so dramatically, right? So the entire research part itself is a big one. Now coming back to the second part, where like, okay, I've done my research and I know these are the pain points I need to address through my omni-channel strategy, is to make sure that the investment is coming at the right place.
Sorry, Liju, sorry to interrupt. Just one point. Omnichannel research is also quite important, right?
Right.
We know that there are many ways of reaching out to people, but the kind of responses you'd get from a consumer if you're sitting across the table from them versus if you call them on their phone versus if you ask them to fill an online survey, right, would be quite different. So
Absolutely.
understanding which of the channels you use for research is also quite important.
Yeah.
But sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah,
you.
no, it's a valid point, and that's this world altogether. There's because when I speak with research agency, there is this entire bias that comes from even the questions that come in. So yeah, so omnichannel research also makes the research itself. So now, as a putting on your CMO hat, right? Now, in terms of priority, right, and if I have to choose, like, where do I put my money, right? Research, touch points, online, offline, where like if you want, if I have to, if a CMO is listening into this podcast and want to say, okay, these are the priorities I should keep, the top 4-5 priorities I should keep. What should somebody keep as the top 5 priorities?
See, I think first of all, you need to understand and I don't know whether this is going to be a popular decision, but you need to understand what the business is expecting from marketing, right? There are a few companies in the world where marketing drives the business, but predominantly it is the business that uses marketing to achieve its objectives. So first of all marketers need to have a very, I think, crystal clear idea in their head as to what does the business need. What does the business need marketing to do, right? So, in a retail scenario, do you need to create awareness of a certain product range? Do you need to create awareness of a category or a particular brand, right? Or do you need to get more people coming into stores? Or do you need to get more transactions out of those people, or higher average transaction values?
Right.
Now, depending on what the business is expecting you to do, you need to build your plan on that. So I think that is the first. If I have to list out the top 5 kind of
Right.
things to be cognizant of, that's the first one. Now, very quickly after that, you need to kind of pivot to what the consumer is expecting from you, right? Your user, consumer, customer, whatever name you have, even patient depending on which industry you're in. What are they expecting from you? What do they want from you? Sometimes you know that, sometimes you don't know that. If you don't know that, then the third part is consumer inciting or research. If you know that because you've been in this industry for a while, then basically you can go ahead with the existing knowledge that exists. After that, I think the points are kind of linked. It is measurability. How will you measure success? What is success and how will you measure it? Fourth point after that is kind of what is the budget that you're able to deploy. Most of the time, my understanding is that you have to look at the outcomes that you're trying to achieve and figure out what is the appropriate budget for that, not what is the activity I'm trying to drive and what kind of budgets I can get for that, right? So once you have that in place, then you come to kind of choice of media touch points. So I would put choice of different touch points probably 5th on the list once you have this clarity.
Right.
And maybe again, I'm talking in a slightly hypothetical setup because it's quite difficult to get all of these things, lined up well. But till you get that done, it's quite difficult to get success, to deliver success with a great touch point or marketing campaign.
Yeah. So the thing is, once you deploy the plan, and that brings me to the next questions, right? So there is no silver bullet marketing strategy that like delivers every time.
I'd love there to be one, but I don't think there is.
So and when I handle my clients, that's the biggest challenge. So I said, when I take on a client, I said that there is no silver bullet. We work along the way. And one of the biggest challenges along the way, even if I only do digital, is attribution.
Yeah.
Where did the final say? Is it last?
Yes.
Is it last touch? What should I attribute the sales to? And omnichannel makes it even more complicated, right?
Sure.
It just blows up, right? Because the touch points are so many. Where do I attribute this the conversion to, right? Now, are there any models that these organizations follow in terms of giving attribution? Or is it just like an overarching this thing? This is the marketing spend, this is the number of customers acquired, this is the sales, this is ROI, ROAS. And we look at an overarching thing rather than looking at a very channel-specific attribution model. How do you approach this?
So I've done work in the past with a number of the large consulting firms where we were building out marketing mix models, right? Now that's something that you can do if you have a fairly good data set. Maybe you have two years of data and you've mapped out your spends by a touch point across every day or at least every week, right? So you have at least maybe around 35, 40 touch points minimum across the different media touch points. You can build that out and you can understand which ones are contributing. This is good for categories that don't change very much. This is good for essentially steady state categories. The moment you have a new product coming in, that can be a massive disruptor. And many of the marketing mix capabilities don't always work.
Right.
One of the best ways to measure how well your omni-channel campaign or marketing is working is if you can create some sort of test and control, right? Typically, if you are not advertising something and the period that you are advertising it in becomes the base, the reference without advertising or without marketing versus what happens when marketing jumps. Again, that's good to do when it's a steady state or when there are some seasonal trends in. You can factor that in. Becomes a little bit more difficult to do when you are operating on an ongoing basis. For example, in retail, it's quite normal to have some campaign running every month, right? So you don't have the luxury of having a base state there. Again, if you are launching a new category, success of that category or success of that new brand can be measured quite easily because you had certain uptakes that you have achieved in the past, and you're able to measure the efficacy of your omni-channel mix in delivering this. So I think that's broadly the way that you would measure the overall success of the campaign. Attribution also means that sometimes you have certain internal benchmarks. Sometimes these are called vanity metrics,
Absolutely.
right? Sometimes these are quite relevant to consumer behavior. So, for example, awareness at some brand awareness at some level can be called a vanity metric, right?
Yeah.
The same way the number of followers you have or the number of engagements or that you get on social media can be called a vanity metric. Now, if you know why those are important to you, right? If you know why you need those awareness numbers or you need those engagement numbers or you need that traffic to your website, then they're not really vanity metrics, right? These are metrics that are important to your business because they form part of a very coherent plan to influence different parts of the consumer journey,
Right.
that the consumer is following. However, if you are blindly saying that, I need more followers, I need more engagement, yeah, I guess you can consider it a vanity metric. And in organizations like that, the only thing that really counts is the revenue that you bring home every month, right? So then that becomes your ultimate kind of, I guess, metric to use to find out whether your activity that month is successful or not.
Great. So I think the D2C consumer brands all have an omni-channel kind of. It's mostly product led, right? So I don't think there is anything that's happening in any other sphere that's developing in because a lot of online and offline. Because I somehow feel the B2B, the omni-channel is events and online, right? So there is this thing that goes like, is there an omni-channel in B2B? It's a completely tangential thought, right? Because that human interaction that happens. So for me, offline is human interaction, right? Anything that goes and human interaction. But do you think at any given point, it's a completely off track question, a B2B business will have a omni-channel strategy or does it exist by that?
Tough to visualize that, to be honest.
Right.
Essentially, there would be multiple touch points that you would want to engage with even in a B2B space, right? However, by definition, you're targeting a much more specialized and much smaller audience.
Right.
You would still be able to engage with that audience across multiple touch points. For example, there may be industry-specific periodicals that you want to go in for. There could be industry-specific social media that you go with, right? And of course, events like you spoke about. But it's a smaller set. I think the principles of omnichannel would stay constant, right? That you need to basically tell a coherent message to your target audience using the different medium that you have at a given point in time.
Cool, great. So thanks a lot, Ryan. I think we can just maybe continue on this. on this topic because it's a large topic, and I don't think this 1 hour does justice. So if anybody has further questions, they can reach out to you on your LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Right? Ryan Fernandez. And if anybody has a question, can reach out to Ryan. Anywhere else you want to have some final words before we close?
No, very interesting topic. So, I mean, I would encourage anyone, any marketer listening to this, to look at something, a bit more expansive than just one or two touch points. But fundamentally, I believe this is driven by how well you understand your consumer and what budgets you have to play around with. It's always much better to be strong in a few touch points versus being spread too thin across
Right.
multiple touch points. That kind of becomes a checkpoint activity, which I'm not a big fan of personally, right? So while this has been largely about omnichannel, do omnichannel if you have the budgets to kind of do it well. Otherwise, stick to the few touch points that are giving you your returns and do those well. I think that's what I would sum up with.
Yeah. So thank you once again, Ryan, and I'll see you around.
Absolutely, Rijo. Thank you so much for having me here. I'll see you around.
Thank you.